he is also a member of our board in Italy, board of the Fondazione Ergo, which is the equivalent of MTM Germany in Italy, and president of our EAWS scientific committee. So Francesco should be connected. Can you hear me, Francesco?
Yes, I am here, and I hope you can see me.
You are beautiful.
First of all, good afternoon to everybody. It's a real pleasure to have the possibility to talk with you about an issue which is relatively new, but is very, very interesting as a development of contemporary ergonomics. I mean the exoskeletons and the certification process. Let me share with you a few slides that I have prepared. So I hope you see these slides.
We do.
Okay, thanks. So let me get them into presentation mode. So now I am able to put them into presentation mode.
Okay.
So, let me start with, these are the topics. Don't worry, I will be very quick in dealing with these topics. Let me start with some homage to the political correctness, so disclosure, financial, and affiliation, and strong belief. But anyway, you will have a copy of these slides, so you can give you that. So the first question is, why exoskeletons? That's a really important question. Why? Because musculoskeletal disorders are the most frequently reported occupational health problem, even in, in almost every country, especially in the so-called richest country, Europe, US, Japan, everywhere. Modern way of work is significant. Now, you know that there are significant uncertainties about the precise relation of some musculoskeletal disorders with occupation. For example, you are in Germany, and in Germany you recognize as occupational induced 1/10 or 1/20 of the diseases that we recognize in Italy, although in Germany there are 80 million people living, and in Italy only 60. And this different pattern means that there is a significant uncertainty about the precise relation with occupation, and the possibility of doing precise measure of both exposure and disease, so that it is possible to establish a causally relevant relation. Now, anyway, it is generally accepted that at least part of some disorders like low back pain, like shoulder pain, or carpal tunnel syndrome may be caused by biomechanical load, which is associated with occupational tasks. And for example, with heavy lifting, low back pain with heavy lifting, shoulder pain with working with the hands over the head, or carpal tunnel syndrome with fast and forceful manual work. Anyway, regardless the uncertainty, is certainly necessary that at least the heavier tasks must be adapted to human requirements as much as possible in order to reduce workers' discomfort and fatigue, and possibly pain, and possibly disease. So in the last years, this has been achieved mostly using automation, but this is not always possible. Automation is effective and may be used in some manufacturing activities, but not in all manufacturing activities. And beside manufacturing, demanding tasks exist also in some service activities. And these activities may be only partially or at least or even not at all amenable to automation. Think about logistics, healthcare, cleaning, agriculture, and so on. So for all these activities, exoskeletons are promising devices which may supplement human capabilities, making the body more able to tolerate some effort. In addition, passive exoskeletons, because we also have seen a number of motor-driven exoskeletons. Well, passive exoskeletons seems to be the more usable of these devices in that they do not require an external power source, so can be used everywhere. They are usually lighter and they can be put on and off easily and quickly, for example, for using the toilet during the working activity. Briefly, it is possible to conceive an exoskeleton like a personal protective equipment against some type of biomechanical overload. So why exoskeletons certification? That's another very important question. Exoskeletons are complex devices, and if their use is to be diffused, buyers must be able to, as we say, buy with confidence these devices and possibly use them with satisfaction. So that's exactly what we do when we buy our automobile. If we are not motor engineers or people who do professionally maintenance of cars and so on, we do not understand how the car will work in every aspect. But we know that cars undergo very different testing for safety, for whatever. So we usually buy this device with confidence, even if they can be even very expensive, and possibly we use them with satisfaction. So that should be the same with the exoskeleton as assisting devices for some occupational tasks. In addition, exoskeletons are new devices. So if I am a buyer and I want to buy these devices for use in my company, I should have confidence that this device is safe to use, first of all, and work as intended. Now we have national and international voluntary technical standard like ISO standard, EN standard. In Italy, you have the DIN in Germany for personal protective equipments, and they essentially fulfill this task. And the buyer assumes that if I buy a certified personal protective equipment, this device will be both safe and effective, and the bottom line will be worth the money I invest. Now, currently, a few technical standards are being developed for the certification of exoskeletons for occupational use. The F48 American standard is probably the one which is closer to its adoption. There is a special project in the national standard body in Italy and other around the world, but none of them is really very close to adoption, but the American standard probably. Now, how to certify exoskeletons? Conceptually, the certification, of course, is a process by which an organization which is not affiliated with the producers will state that the device has passed some sort of tests of safety and efficacy. Safety tests should be directed toward demonstrating that intended use of a device does not harm the user, including unintended but foreseeable circumstances. Efficacy tests should be directed toward demonstrating that intended use of a device protects the use against harm. as compared to the same task performed without the protecting device. Now, what's the catch? Is that safety and efficacy are relatively easier to address in the short term, but more difficult to prove in the long term. Addressing safety of exoskeleton in the short term is possible and relatively easy. Tests should be directed toward demonstrating that the use of the device does not expose the user to injuries of different nature, mechanical or whatever. Another issue is that safety certification should include usability evaluation in order to say to the intended user that the device that they are buying is usable, will not be an excessive burden to the user. Now, addressing safety in the long term is much more complex, as the question could be related, for example, to the use of the device for the whole working life, which is 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week for 40 years. So in the very long term. Now, what can I say about this? To my knowledge, no existing personal protective equipment, shoes, gloves, helmets, has ever been tested for safety in the long term before being introduced to the market. Nobody has, although I have searched extensively in international data banks, I haven't found a single study for which a person has been studied wearing a helmet for 40 years. So what we do is usually addressing the safety of a protective device in the short term. Then we extrapolate to the long term. To this end, we could do something more, for example, with exoskeletons, just because they are new and relatively complex device, possibly introducing some form of post-marketing monitoring after the certification of safety in the long term. That is what is being done with, for example, with drugs. Before a drug is put into use, there are studies on patients, a limited number of patients, but after the drug or the vaccine, for example, is introduced in the use, there is a system of monitoring for example, undesired effects of the use of this medication. And this can be done, for example, with also with devices like exoskeletons. And here I am closing my presentation. The same can be said about the efficacy of the exoskeletons. In the short term, it is possible. It's a little bit more complex than safety testing, and because the test should be directed toward demonstrating that the use of the device at least significantly reduce muscular effort during the intended use. I'm talking about exoskeleton for work with hands above the head, or for exoskeleton intended for supplement human capability during manual material. So this should be reduce the fatigue or the muscular effort as compared to the same task without exoskeleton. Now, surface EMG is an established method of measuring muscular effort and fatigue, and is both effective and acceptable. However, some musculoskeletal disorders, for example, tendon disorders or intervertebral disc disorders, are caused by occupational biomechanical overload, for which the measuring of muscular effort is not so relevant. And measuring the effect of exoskeleton in reducing the load transferred to this body structure requires so far invasive methods, which may even be considered ethically not justified for the scope. Then what is the conclusion of this presentation is that if a device is proven able to reduce at least workers' fatigue, it is not justified to postpone its adoption for concerns about long-term safety, which do not appear to be supported by plausible clues. So, in the end, my view, based on current knowledge, the use of exoskeleton should be increased, but the use should be of exoskeletons which have been certified as at least as effective in the short term. Now, thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. Well, I hope that the microphone works. Otherwise, I use the ice cream. You know, Francesco, thank you very much for your speech. It's a very, deep and professional speeches. For me, those subjects are, part of my life, so I know them quite well. I know that they are not so, easy to catch from the first, from the first round. But the messages given by Francesco are very relevant to today. During the presentation, we have seen, some cases, examples of exoskeletons, and the position of Francesco, Professor Violante, is very strong. He takes a strong position with a positive attitude. We are running several studies on the exoskeleton. We have certified, some exoskeletons with all the reserves and the preconditions, very well highlighted today during the presentation of the exoskeletons. But we are, wherever it is possible and, to reduce, to improve the conditions, and there are no other solutions, as it was clearly stated today by that pyramid, with the 3 levels. Absolutely, this is one solution which can be investigated. So, Francesco, thank you very much for your contribution, scientific contribution, and I hand over to the next speaker, who is Professor Maria Pia Cavatorta from the Polytechnic of Turin. Maria Pia, as well, is a member of our scientific committee, and she will talk about the open challenges and research for automatic assessment of biomechanical workload. So also this topic is very much connected to some examples we have seen today during the summit. So Maria Pia, please go ahead.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me fine, and many thanks to you, Gabriele, and to the organizers for the invitation. So, as you were saying, digital technologies are changing the way we can bring ergonomic principles into the workplace, and also the way we can measure the biomechanical load on workers. In this respect, we see a significant interest on automatic ergonomic assessment, both from the scientific community as well as in the number of founded research programs. And among these programs, I would like to mention the SOFIA project. Is a European project that sees significant participation both from Germany and Italy, as well as the commitment from the German standardization body. And one of the objectives of this project is to promote sensor-based risk assessment methods. And in a letter that was published at the beginning of the project, some of the participants stated why, in their view, there is the need to revise current standards for risk assessment. They are talking mainly about the ISO series 11228 and 11226, as well as the SEN series 1005. So in these standards, the methods that are considered for risk assessment are observational methods. They are pen and paper-based methods that require a trained analyst to perform the evaluation and rate some of the risk factors that can lead to biomechanical overload. And because there is subjective rating, we can have changes between different observers. We can have lack of precision. We can also have restrictions posed in the equations and parameters that are considered. Usually they are also time consuming because they require significant time of observation by the analyst. By converse, they don't require instrumentations, and as such, they are low cost and non-invasive in nature. But nowadays, we have significant changes in the technologies that we may use to assess and quantify these risks. For example, inertia sensors that can be worn and that can provide information on body motions, body angles. Just recently, a glove has been launched in the market that allow a fine tracking on finger movements. So to be able to evaluate what is the type of grip used by the worker, as well as to assess the wrist angles. As you were saying, we also have surface electromyography sensors that are now fully portable and miniaturized. They can allow for monitoring of what is the muscular effort, like in this example for different values of the lifting index, or to monitor the onset of muscular fatigue. And nowadays we are seeing also integrated sensors, EMG sensors together with inertia sensors. But there are also wearable sensors that are present in the market, for example, to monitor what are physiological parameters like the heart rate and the skin temperature. And some of these wristbands are equipped with 3-axis accelerometers, so they have some capabilities of motion tracking. And they may be used, for example, to identify the type of activity that the worker is performing. And for each activity, so knowing what is the duration and the level of biometric data and therefore of effort of the worker. Some companies are also launching some wearable sensors for training purposes. So the idea may be, for example, to provide feedback to the worker on real time on what is, for example, the strategy that they are adopting during lifting activities. So hopefully to reduce what can be the injury at the workplace. Not only wearable devices, we are seeing also a lot of advances in terms of computer vision and in terms of, for example, motion tracking. And we know that now 3D depth cameras are very small and still quite accurate. They come also on our mobile phones, so there are commercial applications for the mobile phone to register motion and to have an idea of what the posture angles of the workers are. So the idea of this SOFIA project is, why don't we use these technologies to make a risk assessment which is sensors based, so based on direct measurements. And I know some time has passed since 2005, but in a very highly cited, more than 1,000 citations, Dr. David actually looked into what was the scientific literature on risk assessment methods to come to the conclusion that when it comes to research, for sure, direct measurements are extremely valid. So by measuring quantitatively what are the risk factors, we can learn a lot about the type of risks to which the workers are exposed. But in his view, when it comes to practitioners, to everyday work of assessing risk, for example, in companies, then observational methods can still be the best trade-off between accuracy, cost, and level of invasiveness on workers. So for sure, time has passed, technology has changed, but I believe some of the points that were raised by Dr. David are still valid, and this is also the opinion of many people on standardization body. So when it comes to the workplace, when it comes to the everyday assessment, can we really trust that these technology are applicable? Because we know most of the researches that were published by independent researchers on the validity of sensor-based risk assessments actually are limited mostly to the laboratory environment or to small size, pilot studies in companies. So there is the need for sure to assess compatibility in a broad sense of these sensors with the work environment. So we know, for example, that there has been in the past problems of magnetic interference with inertial sensors that have been now addressed, but still we don't know what is the level of acceptability for workers on wearing sensors, for example, during a whole shift. What is the level of discomfort they can feel? Is there some hindrance to movements? What about possible interaction with parts of the work environment? And when it comes, for example, to computer vision and to cameras, do we really have the space in the workplace to really position the cameras to be effective? Are there visual occlusions by objects in the environment, by body segments of the same worker or by different workers? Then there is obviously the question of costs. How affordable are these sensors, especially if we have to think of a wide range application in small, medium-sized companies? What is the level of skills that can be required for the correct use of these technologies? Let's think of calibration procedures, for example, or the right positioning of sensors. We know they are talking about implementing some machine learning programs, algorithms to maybe be able to cut off some of these errors, but these will increase the computational cost of data processing. And then obviously we have problems of privacy. Whenever we record data and we store data, how can we deal with the fear by workers of being tracked when we use sensors? So there are significant issues that are open, obviously, for discussion. Some are technical issues, but some are also concerned with company policies and in some cases also national policy when it comes to privacy. And then there is another point that is raised by the SOFIA project, and that was also raised by the previous talk. What about when we are dealing with exo-assisted work tasks? So can we still use methods that are present currently in the standards to rate the effort by the worker? And this is true obviously for passive exoskeletons. It can be even more complex when it comes to active exoskeletons. And in general, when it comes to close interactions with with robotic systems, like for example in collaborative robots. So obviously this is another open questions on current methods. They originated to assess manual work. Can they be still suitable for today working scenarios? And what about again, exoskeletons or close interactions with robotic systems. In this case, can we think of maybe taking advantage from the sensors that are often embedded in these robotic systems, the machine learning algorithms that often are employed in these systems? Can they help with risk assessment? And then there is a more general question, and I stop here. If we think that technology and digital technologies can really change the way we do risk assessment, can we think that the methods that we are currently using and that originated to be observational methods, can they still be apt for automatic assessment? In other words, can they fully exploit all the data, the quantitative data that we can evaluate by using, for example, wearable devices in the workplace? But on the other side is the structure of this method, the parameters that we are using, the thresholds that are present in these observational methods and that were thought to be rated by an expert observer. Are they the right method to be implemented in simulation tools or mobile device applications? So I think also these basic questions are really relevant if we believe that virtual simulation or sensor-based methods are the new way, the future of risk assessment. And I thank you all for listening. Thank you.